Scott Taylor, PolyMed. Welcome to MedTech Unboxed.
Yeah, good to see you, Steve.
Hey, it's great to have you on, Scott. There's so much activity and technology going on with bioresorbables, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about the next generation of absorbable polymers.
Yeah, something we love to do. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. When we talk about absorbables, they're fulfilling gaps or unmet needs in medtech, tissue engineering, orthopedics, and I don't know if you want to start with just a high level overview of that. And then as we talk about some of these different technology platforms, you can also reference some of the therapies or applications that they're used in.
Yeah, absolutely. So at PolyMed, we focus almost exclusively on absorbable polymeric materials for medical devices. The base technology of bioresorbable polymers has been around for quite a while, about 50 years. But these are mostly based on things like polyglycolide and polylactide, which are fantastic materials. They definitely have their place, but there are some limitations there as well, particularly in their biocompatibility as they continue to degrade. What we have focused our efforts on is developing really unique copolymers. They're still based on these glycolide and lactide, but have increased compliance, increased biodegradability, increased biocompatibility throughout their lifetime. And then built on top of that is really an engine to process that into semi-finished and finished goods, including the traditional things like extrusion and textile operations that make just a huge variety of medical devices, including things like hernia mesh and orthopedic ligament repair tapes and support things like injection molded screws and anchors. It's a great place to be. We continue to develop new materials, which I'm sure we'll get into later on. But the base for us are these what we call polyester. They're thermoplastic, and that ester linkage is the chemical group that is sensitive to hydrolytic degradation. So they degrade in the presence of water in the body. And ultimately, over time, they completely go away. So we think that fills the gap, really, of a lot of repairs in medical. They only have a temporary need to be repaired, and the body is going over in some way, negating the need for that implant in the first place. And so we want to do a job for a short amount of time, and then get out of the way and let the body, get back to just being the body without any foreign material there.
Yeah, I mean, when people refer to smart materials, boy, this is a smart line of materials, right?
Yeah.
Doing their job
Right.
mechanically, biomechanically, and then disappearing. A lot goes into the formulations, to the processes to maintain the integrity of the material. And based on that, what are some of the real challenges when you're developing and manufacturing these absorbable materials? Because in the back of my head, I'm thinking that 10 years ago or more, Abbott invested $1 billion and absorbed their bioresorbable stent, and it didn't. They took it off the market, and kind of everybody was sour about bioresorbables. But here we are today, and they have their new stent out. So just kind of wanted to understand what are some of those challenges that people have had to overcome to get market entry.
Yeah, absolutely. So believe it or not, when you have a material that is designed to degrade, when you process that material, it will degrade.
Yeah.
Right. So that is certainly a big challenge for us, and for anyone processing absorbable polymers, is the control of the material throughout the manufacturing process. So we do a lot of extrusion here, and then we do a lot of textile operations. And the biggest challenge there is keeping the material, pristine throughout those processes, without triggering that degradation. So, extrusion is super critical for that. We see a lot of potential for damaging. You can never make the material better, but you can also always damage the material through every process. So those are, some of the significant challenges, and why, there's not that many people who do a great job in processing absorbable materials. And I think, that Abbott stent is a great example, but we know what I love about that is, so you had this absorb stent, and it was, very famous for, only be on the market for a short amount of time. But I think it was so interesting just because it was a great application of absorbables, and the potential was huge, right? But what I admire about that is that they removed it from the market, but they didn't give up on the technology. Right. And so this all comes down to the right material selection. It all starts with the material selection, and then applying the right processes. So, the stent for their first indication, it was too thick. All right. The walls were too thick to overcome the limitations of the polymer that they selected. And then the laser cutting processes, basically didn't leave the material so it was flexible enough to expand in the right way, to have the mechanical integrity needed. But then they found these these other indications, so peripheral vascular indications, that they were able to go after and now have some success with, which is fantastic to see. So they have been able to salvage that investment and make something very meaningful, very interesting out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like starting with coronary maybe was not the right idea, but going to peripheral is a better approach.
They started with the biggest challenge, right? I think them, they weren't the only ones at it. Like, so there were other companies starting with other materials. Like Revastent was another pretty famous version of that. Different base material. But similar challenges, overcoming like the balance of mechanics with part dimensions.
Okay.
But you find the right indication. It's all product market fit in the end, right? So finding what that part really needs to do and what your limitations of technology are.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for going over that with me. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let's get into some of these next gen absorbable biomaterials, and we got a couple things we're going to talk about. Your PLLA based Lactoprene series, right? And
absolutely,
we did an unboxing earlier of some of these materials. The mesh, and some of the different braided configurations. Why don't you kind of give us walk us through this technology platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So, funnily enough, this is actually a fairly similar story to that absorb stent, in that, many years ago, there was an absorbable polylactide braid that was introduced to the market. And it was relatively quickly then pulled from the market as well. So, and the reason is, there's a couple of reasons. That they were able to convert it into a high strength braided structure, and use it in a number of ways. And they had broad adoption pretty quickly, actually. But the challenge with polylactide based materials is they just can take so long to degrade. So if you have a PLLA or something close to that in a random copolymer version, you get these big crystalline segments of polylactide that are very resistant to degradation. And then in the late stages of degradation, you basically have these crystalline remnants remain that can cause some bioincompatibility. So a lot of what we base this Lactoprene family on, these are copolymers. These are segmented copolymers. So we have a flexible segment with higher crystallinity segments. So we still get the strength, but we get a lot more toughness. And it also controls the crystallite structure, the crystalline structure. So we don't get as long extended crystallite chains.
Yeah.
We are able to break that up a little bit. And so, we feel it's more biocompatible throughout its entire degradation life. And that's what you can see, when you're actually able to hold a monofilament, and it's still somewhat compliant in a mesh structure, then that is very different than the traditional PLLA.
Yeah.
It can take 5-7 years to degrade, and has those late stage issues. So that's where we focus, is higher compliance, better control over degradation life, and degradation properties.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have we did the unboxing, and we had the
Yeah.
monofilament mesh and some of the braids, and then this lattice 3D SLA printed structure. And
Yeah.
couple questions. You talked about the degradation rate
Mhm.
and sort of the crystalline properties, kind of the hard soft segments, right?
Right.
And you can tune those as well, right, based on the formula.
That's yes, Steve. You're right on it. Right. You're an
Okay.
extrusion guy. So we're speaking the same language here.
Yep.
And extrusion is incredibly challenging with these things. I mean, I think you can imagine, etching is, traditional, like, like a PET or, polypropylene or whatever.
Yeah.
We add a little bit of complexity with the stability of the materials being a challenge. And then the fact that we're making copolymers, and these are segmented copolymers, makes things challenging as well. But yes, so depending on that soft segment and the hard segment ratios, make things that are closer in mechanics to like a polypropylene or even a nylon, right?
Yeah.
So higher flexibility, but still very tough, higher elongation. Or we can make something closer to a traditional, like a PET, right? So another polyester with a little bit higher stiffness. And they're going to process. We take a lot of our cues from the processing of those materials. That is, scaled appropriately and controlled a little bit differently with these absorbable thermoplastics. But we make versions with large soft segments, so very compliant. And then we make things with small soft segments that are very, very much more rigid, like you see in that printed part that you're
right. Okay. Speaking of the more compliant or softer materials, we want to move into the PhotoSet, which is your TPU formula.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about that. During the unboxing, I kind of ripped some of these up. That was on purpose, just to show.
It's these are intended to be compliant, and so it is a very lightweight foam structure, even though you might not be able to see the detail on on the pod. So we did see a gap in materials, when we looked at the world of absorbable polymers and how we're able to process those into medical products. So 3D printing holds such promise, right? And I think everyone knows that at this point. But you have to be able to make very highly toleranced and highly controllable, high fidelity parts out of that, which is a challenge. You really can't do that with fused deposition printing, right? Filament based melt processing. And then there's a lot of challenges with powders in absorbable materials. So we looked at stereolithography as a wide open area, but there's not a great material that is absorbable, biocompatible throughout the entire degradation window, but also mechanically competent. And so that thought is where we started, and we were able to to develop a platform of materials that were mechanically competent, that we were able to process by stereolithography. And this isn't any super fancy printer that we had to custom build, right? So we're using things that are available, and make some really interesting materials. That foam is an example. I think you also had an airway stent that was more of a solid part. High compliance. Yeah, there you go. So you can kind of squeeze it, you can kind of move that around. And so it's resilient, it's tough. But we're able to make, process that throughout, in a variety of ways. And that material degrades over the course of about 9 months. But we have versions that last longer. We have versions that are much faster as well. So we see this platform, this next generation of materials, starting with the stereolithography, as a great place to be, and hopefully unlocks a whole new level of complexity in the ability to make medical devices.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for going through those. I wanted to touch on composites as well as reading some of the information that you gave me, where
Yeah.
there's the potential to um, embed
Mhm.
or combine synthetic absorbable polymers with natural tissue, biological tissue, and
Mhm.
things like that, different composite structures, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the composites are nothing new,
Mhm.
really, to medical devices and not to absorbable devices either. So it's very common in orthopedics, right, to have a ceramic polymer composite, and that's a lot of the activity in suture anchors and screws. It's based on composite technology. You just have the ceramic component with the plastic, which acts more of like a binder
Yeah.
to create the whole. And you get some bioactivity from that ceramic material. It might be HA, or it might be biphasic, it might be just straight TCP. So that's been around for several years, and we do quite a bit of work with that, including things like compounding with glasses or the like, right?
Okay.
So we're able to create bioactivity from a polymer, and really the polymer itself isn't bioactive. But it can provide that mechanical function and then carry things that are themselves bioactive.
Interesting.
Let's apply that same thought to naturally based materials, naturally occurring materials, things like collagen, things like hyaluronic acid is a big area for us. And how do we get the benefit of the natural materials with the mechanics and the degradability and the processability, the things that we know about our absorbable polymers,
Yeah.
right? And so there's some great examples. I think there's a company called Telebio. They're embroidering absorbable plastics, absorbable plastic materials into naturally occurring things like collagen, right?
Mm.
Or you could do it the other way around. You can have a natural, like an HA fiber that you interlock with a traditional textile based on a polyester type absorbable material. So then again, you're basically maximizing the benefit, right? So you have the best of the plastic, absorbable plastic material that you are then adding to with the bioactivity of extracellular matrix or collagen or the like.
Gotcha. Right.
So we're very excited to be a part of that. It's something we've focused in a lot on. We have a whole group that basically is just looking at composite structures, whether it's textile or whether it's the SLA, the 3D printing type materials. How can we maximize the benefit of the absorbable, add bioactivity, and then really benefit the potential of the medical device it's being used for?
Okay. One other, I think it's a composite I wanted to ask you about, is this absorbable magnesium for promoting bone growth, right? Can you talk a
Right.
little bit about that?
Yeah. So I guess so we've talked about lots of absorbables, right? So
Yeah.
we have the absorbable materials that we make, which are typically plastic and they're polymeric in nature. I have the natural materials. There's absorbable ceramics, and a lot of those require the absorbable polymer to provide, basically to meld everything together to provide a carrier and mechanical integrity of the part. There's other examples of absorbable metals, so magnesium kind of being the front runner there. The challenge with that is during degradation, some of the magnesium does produce some gases. How do you control the degradation rate and the byproducts of that? I mean, we spend a lot of time thinking about that, not just the part in the beginning, but what happens as it degrades, what is it eluting, what materials is it turning
Yeah.
into,
Yeah.
and ultimately how is that material exit the body, right? And magnesium, whether it's a solid absorbable magnesium, and these are all magnesium alloys, right? But they are ultimately going to degrade, and whether that's incorporated as a powder, similar to like a composite, like a biphasic TCP, it within a thermoplastic carrier, like a screw. You do the
Yeah.
same thing with metals, or there's coatings that you can apply to more solid metal parts as well. So really interesting area that there's, I've seen increasing activity in this. There was a big bump in interest about 10 years ago. There's still so many challenges with controlling that degradation byproduct. So you want it to be biocompatible throughout the degradation life.
Okay. That's great. Thanks for going through the composite structures. I did want to ask you something. I was thinking about our conversation based on a previous conversation when I was talking to some of the folks at the Biosyn lab in Minneapolis, where they can simulate devices with real cadavers. And they were talking about some of the things that they can simulate or test in cell growth, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Where we want growth within a stent frame, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's applications where you kind of want to inhibit growth, like calcium on a TAVR frame.
Right.
So are there any absorbable polymer technologies that inhibit growth, biological growth? Is that a thing?
So yeah, it really is an interesting question, and I've definitely seen a surge in interest in this topic, right? So these are synthetic polymers. They are not drugs.
Yeah.
Right. So, however, the things that they degrade into, right? So polyglycolide or glycolide segments in a polymer are going to degrade into glycolic acid.
Yeah.
Polylactide or lactide copolymers, those degrade into lactic acid. And there is evidence, that these materials are, preserving in nature. So while we may not get, a full, activity of a drug product, there is the potential there at least to control the local area and act as a preservative, so we can somewhat manage infection in that way. So at least to a certain level, right?
Yeah.
One of the big things is these are synthetic; they're not food sources,
right?
So we're not going to contribute to infection, but based on the material and how it degrades, what it degrades into, the local environment, right? These are acids, so there's going to be some modification of the local pH. The porosity, the pore structure, right? The depth of pore, all of these things can contribute to either preventing ingrowth or promoting ingrowth of new tissues into that synthetic medical device.
Gotcha.
This is something that that we have done. Typical mesh structures, right? So you're actually getting tissue ingrowth throughout that.
Yeah.
And then for our materials, those are ultimately going to go away. So you're still left with that remaining tissue structure that's left behind. But there are some pretty famous examples, like Ceprafilm being one, right? So the whole purpose of that was actually to prevent ingrowth into a product or growth between two tissue planes, right?
Yeah.
And that is something that can be accomplished as well. It goes back to understanding the healing rate of the tissues that are damaged, the degradation timeline, and the structure of the part that you're making, whether it's a solid part or whether it's a open porous part that you intend for tissue to grow into. And then being able to track that, not just initially, but throughout the degradation life of that material. Some of our materials degrade very quickly, right? Yeah. So a couple of days to a couple of weeks for mechanical strength, and then mass loss shortly after that. The Lactoprene that you've seen, that it's more like 6 to 8 months of mechanical strength. So great for orthopedic applications.
Yes.
Soft tissue, you probably want something a little bit shorter, something maybe a little bit more intermediate. And then the design is that secondary level of control about what happens to the part when in contact with that tissue. So that Biosyn lab, they do great work. There's others that we work with a company called iFiber in the past, and they do this cellular modeling. So really get into some of the mechanistic indications of a material in a form for that particular indication. So very, very cool.
Yeah. One last question, because you touched on it a little bit. Anytime you get involved with drugs, it expands the regulatory and it makes things a lot more complicated, right? But
Mhm.
some of these stents are drug-eluting, scaffolds, and wanted to
Right.
know if do you get involved in any of those formulas where there's maybe drugs, coatings, or added to the synthetic polymers?
Yeah, so so we do not currently support any of those drug
Okay.
products or the combination products, but this is definitely, I mean, it's an area of interest, and the combination all depends on what the drug is, the risk profile of that drug with
Yeah.
the medical device, right?
Yeah.
So things like antimicrobials, depending on the strength of that antimicrobial, a little bit easier, to manage. But we're a medical device company, Steve,
Yeah.
right? So we definitely focus on that, on materials and processes that support medical devices.
Okay.
But it's another version of a composite, right?
Yeah.
So you have kind of these two materials that both serve unique purposes. The drug just has a very specific, pharmaceutical purpose.
Right. Okay. Thanks for going on. Thanks for touching on some things that we didn't talk about previously either. I appreciate it. Just
Yeah.
kind of come up as we talk. So it's always great to have a free flowing conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Scott, this has been great. Thanks for the unboxing that we did and this podcast. Excellent content, technology, and very informative. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
Great
We'll see you,
talk.
Scott.
All right. Bye.